Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Game Detectives podcast. Every episode we're going to talk about a game or a game series, what we like, what we don't, as well as some lessons we can take away from the game. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everybody, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Game Detectives podcast. Today, Travis and I are going to be talking about the end, potentially, of the Danganronpa franchise. Danganronpa V3, which in this case, spoiler alert, does not stand for version 3.
Somebody told me, because I remember seeing that it was V3, and I thought, oh, why is it called that? That's weird. And then I remember seeing somebody said that the anime was called 3, and that was supposed to be kind of an extra part. So I thought, oh, okay. And I never really thought anything about it. But then in the context of the game, when it's revealed that the V actually had a point, that was actually the one of the biggest reveals of this year. Again, pointing out how stupid you, the audience, are when I just thought, oh, it's just V, whatever, who cares? It doesn't mean anything. But it means something. This game wants you to pay attention to every detail, and I love that.
To little bits. What I like in the beginning is, so I was reading, I shouldn't say reading, I was watching like a quick little summary of the game in preparation for us chatting, and I forget that in the beginning, like, you first come out, and then you meet the Mono Cubs, and then they're like, crap, we screwed this up, we gotta, like, do it again, and then
yeah, because they're still in, like, their normal clothes, and, like, I guess... once you've played the whole game, I guess you understand what that is about, but I didn't get it at all when I was playing for the first time, and I just didn't expect anything, because sometimes Danganronpa games like to throw stuff at you that has nothing to do with anything.
And often the threads that they do not follow through with are the disappointing ones, so...
Yeah, this game in the first, just like, if you're talking pre-trial 1, or like at least up until the actual trial itself, it throws a lot of really cool things at you. But the first thing that I immediately noticed was just how much of a leap this game was. I guess I don't want to say technologically, but maybe it was with the budget. But the art is so much cleaner. All the characters have maybe like twice as many poses. The music is much more intricate. The UI and the color palette is very intricate. And this was a detail that I really appreciated. Every single line in the game is now fully voice acted. Before, maybe you'd get one sentence and some of it would be text, or some of the trial stuff would be text, but everything is fully voice acted. And I think, in a way, much they didn't change, again, the formula really at all, or really innovate on gameplay. They didn't really need to, but in terms of the art and the presentation, it is a significant leap up from the first two games.
Definitely. And I think that in the trials, this time around are the most enjoyable to play.
Oh my god, there's so much more dynamic because they change fonts and kerning and text, and it's more involved. There's sound effects and more camera angles. It's great.
Yeah, it's great. It's like, and it's kind of what they do with the setting too, where it's the school, but then they expand beyond it. It's like taking the seed and the germ of the first game and the second game and expanding on it and making it bigger, but also more streamlined in terms of like accessibility too.
And I wonder if that was just something that they wanted to do, or only now were just able to do, or felt like they had to do, because trials are also now significantly longer. Before, the first game, 45 minutes to an hour and a half. I think at the 2, you don't really get them longer than 2 hours. But this game, you can have 3, 4, 5 hour trials. They are significant pieces.
Yeah. So speaking of trials, let's get into the first one.
This is the best first trial out of all the games.
I agree. I think all of the first trials are actually pretty strong.
This one is a league of its own for me.
I'm like conflicted about it because I like the twist in it, but then it's also like I would rather have KAEDE as the protagonist the whole
That's
time.
what I was going to say. That was my main complaint, actually, is that I really liked the idea of having a protagonist that actually has like a talent. I thought that was kind of a missed thing. I mean, obviously they do in the first two games, but having your character be the musician offers some cool stuff. And it actually made sense for the gameplay, which was a really cool touch, because it was supposed to be the parts where multiple people are talking and you have to single out who's saying what. It's supposed to be, oh, she's a musician and she has a good ear for chords. So I thought that was cool. And also that it doesn't mean anything once you get past the twist. So they're just really setting you up on that one. I also liked that it was a girl. I thought that was a cool thing. And she was a much more active protagonist because we're used to having the guy who's kind of whatever. But that's the point, I guess, is they want you to have wanted to play as KAEDE.
That's true. I do think it could have been cool, now that we're talking about musical talent, it could have been cool if there was like a mechanic about like detecting if people's, it would be really hard to make, but I'm thinking like detecting when people's pitch change when they're like lying or something.
Yeah, they could have done something cool like that because that is, without a doubt, this is also the most thematically distinct game. This game is about truth and fiction and fact. Every single trial ties into this. Most of what characters say tie into this, whether intentionally or kind of indirectly. But this game, and that would have made sense. And I it's a little bit disappointing in that aspect too, because there is stuff where, like, being able to lie is kind of a mechanic in the game, but you really don't have it. It's like each trial you have one opportunity where you can lie, and it's incredibly obvious when you're supposed to do it. So it's kind of a half-baked mechanic, but then again, maybe that's the point.
I think the best part of the first trial is how it ties into the last one. Like that's really cool.
I also think that even just the trial's existence itself is kind of a cool twist. Before you get to the big twist, the fact that Ran Taro is the character to have died, and he's the character that we know nothing about. We don't know his ultimate talent. We've heard him say 2 cents. So I think that's something you didn't really see before. I guess you could maybe say with the Fat Byakuya doppelganger, but this is a very cool idea to have a mystery of one of the character's talents and that character's already dead. I liked that. And I mean, okay, this is the hard thing that's going to be with criticizing this game on any level, is because of the way it ends and because of the narrative, you could say that any flaw or complaint about this game is something that they did intentionally. That's one of the dilemmas with this.
Well, yeah, but I do there. It's not like a note against the game, but like it is a pretty common trope of like you lose your like favorite female character to become stronger for it. Like it's like they do that in the first one too. And just kind of like like I just wanted it to mix it up even a little more.
I think it mixes it up a lot.
It does.
Terms of, I mean, when you lay it out like that, it doesn't sound that complicated. But the idea that you, as in like the player, your character was actually the murderer is an idea that is on the right edge of, you know, how have they not done this before? This makes complete sense. And like you should have known that this was an option because you really don't consider it until it happens. But because of the way the other games worked out, it makes sense that this is the logical next step. And I think that's what makes it a really good twist.
I think it's really good. And like how they give you enough hints like throughout when you are KAEDE, they give you like just enough hints throughout where like when she leaves the classroom and it says she dropped everything and ran, you're like, oh, that was her like dropping the shot put ball. So it's like you're getting like little tastes here and there.
Yeah, I didn't pick it up till the very end when they're saying, she's like, you know who it is, Shuichi, and I'm going through every character because I'm like, I feel stupid, I must have just missed it, and it's like, no, it couldn't have been them, it couldn't have been them, it couldn't have been them, and then I'm like, oh, I get it, it was Shuichi, and then it's like, oh, it's not that either.
I thought it was Shuichi too.
I remember thinking like, okay, what the heck am I doing wrong? And then it finally clicked for me that I had to pick her, and I think that's kind of a cool thing because I think a lot of people might play the game. They may have played it that way, like they didn't really guess it, and then it kind of, because then it makes sense because you are Shuichi kind of figuring it out, putting the pieces, and that's. I think the second game had a brief section where you play as Nagito.
Yep, you do the game in the tower.
Yeah, they take really good advantages of these sections where you're kind of different perspective characters.
Yeah, I think it's really good too, and it's also just creative. I think a lot of the trials and like the methods of, besides we'll get to the third one, they're pretty creative, and like is this a creative one too? It's like simple enough to like understand, but then you're like, oh, like it's cool that they're trying to push beyond what's happened before or like go beyond the normal.
They lay enough little reasonable, because I also thought it could have been the guy who was like a tennis player who murdered someone with the ball, because you think, oh, he threw the ball. They set up enough like 2 or 3 other ones where you're kind of thinking about other people. You're not at a complete blank. And you know what really sells this whole trial is the death scene, I think, is one of the best.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's, especially with this game, but this trial too, is the death scenes are, I think, significantly more violent and brutal. They're much less cartoony than they were in the other games, and they're more disturbing, and that kind of sets, once again, it's like a this thing is kind of real moment. But if you think about the last game, the first execution trial was like he got baked in a volcano like a giant pan. It looked silly.
Yeah.
Was not funny. This was kind of disturbing.
Yes, it was very serious. So like the second trial, then I was sad because two of my favorite characters got killed again, just like in the second one. Ugh.
Yeah, I really liked the little guy. I thought I liked this arc because this also again proposes a unique scenario where you can't really say he's like suicidal, but you have a student who is sort of offering themselves up as the one to be taken for the greater good, which on itself is a cool idea, but we're given new context after the death that the maid Kirumi, was that her name? Kirumi was actually this is a really, I don't know, it sounds more believable when you're playing the game, but she's the prime minister of Japan actually. Yeah, it's a really weird thing, but I guess it's like you've bought everything else up until now, so you don't have trouble buying that.
Yeah, I think where the trial and the path leading up to it, what makes the first one so good is like the emotional characters. You spend a lot of time with them, you get to know them, and then in the second one, like you spend a lot of time like, oh, Kokichi is like trying to get everybody's like cub pads, and then like the two people that are involved in the murder don't have anything to do with that entire scene you're a part of.
Yeah.
And so like that like makes it a little weird, just in terms of like the emotional stakes not being as high for the player. Because usually in like when somebody gets murdered, you have like some kind of connection to it. But I feel like with the second trial, it's always a little hard to get right because you obviously don't want to make it obvious who's gonna die next too. I do think it was cool though, like figuring out Ryoma's not only the tennis pro but also the prisoner, the ultimate prisoner, and it's like the idea of like having those two character traits, those two ultimate abilities, I think is also cool and interesting. And I never really thought like a character could have two of them. So that was
it
like,
kind of
cool...
ties in with Kirumi too, because she's the ultimate maid, but she's also the prime minister. So in a way, it's kind of showing how these characters are more than just like the literal stereotype title that they're given, and you should kind of think a little bit more about. And this ties in again with the end of the game, is you need to be thinking about who are these people besides their skill and their talent and what we've been told they are.
Mm-hmm. Because we find out at the very end that
it completely erases
arbitrary.
any meaning from it. But again, that's the point.
The point is the point throughout is like their skills are kind of arbitrary, and in a way, like their skills are just kind of set up for them to like kill other people.
And more so than ever with this game, when it was revealed that they are literally just set up to create enticing reality television. I think since the first game, I had been wondering about the possibility of them never really considering that maybe one person's survival would be worth everybody else dying. Not that it, should be, or, whatever your opinion is on that. But I thought it was weird that they never brought that up or thought about it. So I liked in this game that was a legitimate question that they had to ask. Because I do think if for whatever reason anime kids in real life were stuck in this situation, that's a question that would come up.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting. I like that it was like the maid. Obviously, this is all fictional, even in the world itself. But like, I like that the maid is also the prime minister. Like, that has just like a good resonance for like, it would make sense that her character would have that like twist to her role. Mm-hmm. I like that idea.
It's also they had to kill her because she was becoming. She like, in the first trial in this, it's like she knows everything. She has all the answers. She was too helpful, and that's a good way of building that she's maybe in a league above all the other students. But narratively, it would have been too hard to keep her around much longer anyway. So
unless she was gonna be like Maki's character and kind of how her character develops, like she would have to take on that role in order for her to, because she's already starting at like a much more competent level than everybody else.
That's something to add, is you do get a lot lot more time with these characters in this game. I think this game is like, is it 40, 50? It felt like 50, some incredible amount. So you're really, you get more, I think, scenes that you kind of have to watch. Like, you're getting less optional scenes than you would. But the optional scenes in the first 2 games weren't worth a whole lot. Anyway, it kind of varies on character to character. But with a slightly more scripted approach, I feel like you get greater connections to a lot of these.
I think it's also cool, and they don't really. Oh, I don't think they use the structure as much in the. Wait, what's the 4th trial again?
The 4th trial is the virtual reality.
Oh yeah, so they do. But I like the use of like the structure of the building. I think it's always cool when they can like do clues like almost, I shouldn't say it's meta, but it like almost is, where it's like you have to figure out not only like the crime scene, but then you need to figure out like how it can exist within the realms of the area you're playing in. And I think that's always it's a cool way. So like figuring out like how you could transport a dead body from like one room while still following all of these rules, that was really fun for me, and that was like part of why I like the trial.
I guess something to ask about too, since we didn't really bring it up, is what are your, I don't even know what to think of. What are your thoughts on the mono kids?
uh I don't know. Like I think there's a lot of them that just kind of like, I don't really see where they're trying, what their purpose is.
I understood what they were trying to do and say with the character Usagi the rabbit in the last one, but I do not understand. They don't mean anything in a literal narrative sense. I don't understand what they could possibly be meant to represent. Instead of 2 options, maybe the fact that they're disposable, like the kids are disposable, or you could say, oh, well, at the end it's revealed that this is actually the 53rd season of Danganronpa, or 53, right? Yeah, 53rd one, and things have gotten so ridiculous they had to introduce more and more gimmicks, and you're making fun of the fact that you're game designers that had to add new gimmicks to the game. But that's something that only comes into play until the very, very end, and there's so many other things that come with that reveal that the mono kids are something that I'm not thinking about.
Yeah, I forget if they mention it. I think there's a part where they do say like, how else are we gonna make all that sweet like merch money or whatever, like,
Or something like, we got to keep things interesting or something like that. So it's intentional to tie in.
yeah,
But
I think more that meta-ness, just like keep like sprinkling in. I think the mono kids would be a really good area, because then you could like, because then you could be like, oh, they're being humorous because it's like they're breaking the 4th wall for like the real world player, but then it turns out they're breaking the 4th wall because the game exists within the game.
5 is too many too. They even in terms of like, their different colors and designs, I have trouble remembering what their things were. I don't really, they don't separate those. Maybe if like the mono cubs had been like, I guess like you could have like an angel and devil on your shoulder type, but that's kind of what they were supposed to doing with Monokuma and Usagi in the last one. So I really don't think it was necessary. It doesn't take that much time, but it takes enough in a game that at times can maybe feel a little bloated. I think it's something you could have taken out. And it's like, I bet you we won't talk about it again the rest of this podcast.
No, besides the weird part when Mono Fanny is like pregnant. Which is so dumb. But that's, yeah. Yeah, the Mono kids are just, I get what they're going for. I do think like you had said, like, can we criticize something when like the game is trying to like do like the game is like deliberately trying to make things messy, and I'm like, this. I think this is an
that's
area
their shield for this whole.
Exactly. So like this is an area where it's like, no, like this can definitely have been improved if you like take out 2 of them and really just have like 3 characters. I don't know.
In that same vein, there is a lot of time and attention giving to kind of like the friendship trio that is your main character, Shuichi, Maki, and Kaito. There's a lot of time given to that, and honestly, those scenes I don't think are necessary. I think we could develop like liking and understanding these characters without that, and sort of just in terms of like what Maki's arc is or Kaito's arc. We'll get to Kaito. I like his last moment, But in terms of like their just interactions with each other, it feels very generic, and I don't think it. But then again, that's the thing is it's V3 in the context of the game. It's a reality show, and they're adding a generic reality. So I guess that can go with that too. But I think those parts can kind of drag.
Yeah, I agree. Especially when you can, like, we get what they're going for, right? They're trying to like make fun of, but also like revel in the idea of like a romance arc and like in a reality TV show or whatever. But like
Yeah.
it's also you can do it in ways where it doesn't become derivative, and you can like do it in creative ways, like taking it maybe outside of the context of the same space every time,
Or
or
make it sillier, make it stupider. This game, I think could have. It is a very funny game, and I think a lot of that is actually on the English localization. They really, I don't know if they just had more freedom this time, but there's a lot of like really funny things you can tell were added just for an English audience. At the same time, though, a lot of the game is really heavy, so maybe if they could have found a way to make those kind of, like 20-minute cutscenes where they're kind of talking stuff like a little funnier, I wouldn't have minded as much. Because a lot of the trials, except for, we'll talk about 3 real quick here. That's the closest I would say to like a jokey or not so serious trial, and even then, it's just kind of weird. What do you
yeah,
think of Trial 3?
I with like the whole cult thing, it's just like I for and she's just like an annoying character, kind of like um was that Kamiko? No, in the previous game.
Oh, Hiyoko?
Yeah. Like she is annoying, like she's mean. And this one it's like she's annoying, she's manipulative. It like this whole this whole trial is like kind of like in the first one and in the second one. It's designed to get rid of joke characters.
They spent a lot of time building up like Angie being unlikable and like doing stuff like that, but it's not satisfying.
Well, they did it in the first one, but you're not going to have like the religious zealot come till the end when you're trying to talk about like the metaness of the game, or you're not going to
Yeah.
have this guy who like has the soul of his sister within him, which is
Well, we don't find that out
yeah.
today, but the same thing with Tenko, where 95% of her lines are just about how she's a lesbian, so I would consider her to be a joke character too.
It's what benefits it, and then what also is a drawback of it is that like you have this trial and it's all just about being weird and being funny and whatever, but then it's also like, well, then like the character and the core of the game then is kind of shifted to this weird realm that doesn't feel like it fits with the rest of the game.
They had a moment in this one too where after Tenko had been found to be dead, like almost immediately after, you find, because I thought that was a pretty big shocker to be honest, and then you find Kokichi and he's got blood all over him and they do like a fake out death.
Yep.
I 100% thought that was real, and I remember kind of like getting up out of my chair when I was playing that. So I was thinking they just killed 3 characters in a row.
That would have been a twist. They would have got the kids with that one.
This case has so many weird things about it.
I like the locked room aspect, but it's like
Yep,
it's
that's
really
cool.
easy to be like, oh, it's probably the thing sticking out of the clay figure next to the door that locked it. It's
Also, I
probably
think they
that.
make it really obvious that Kokichi, is that his name? He's obviously responsible for one of the murders. And I think they make that obvious really quickly. And it's a huge missed opportunity because it would have been a really cool concept to have 2 different people do 2 different unrelated murders because of some stupid rule you can only have one blackened is what it's called. And it would have been cool to navigate what would be the rules with that, what would happen. And then also the idea of, I thought what they were going to do is Kokichi was found not guilty, but he actually was the murderer. And then you'd have to have somebody in your group that you knew was a murderer. And I thought that would be a cool concept too, is how would they interact with him knowing that he committed. But no, they have to play it just like the Trials 3s of the first 2 games where there's 2 victims. The way they're killed is kind of obvious. I will give them this. The very ending twist is so weird that I kind of like it in a way.
It's like I would put this trial at the lower range of trials in general across the
Yeah.
series, just because it kind of falls into the same trap as the second trial in the second game, where you get all of this exposition about things that, like, we understand the character is creepy and, like, he's weird because he's into these, like, arcane rituals, and we get that. But then you kind of just get thrown this weird, like, thing where it's like, oh, I killed these two girls because I wanted them to be friends, quote unquote. It's so inane that it's, again, it's just like the tone thing. It's like, what are they going for, you know?
He tried, or his goal was to kill 100 women, to be friends with his dead twin sister, of which he has an incestuous relationship with. And I don't know, the way that they played that out, and the way they did his death scene, and the way he kind of like bravely embraced death. This one, I think the point of this trial is to offer, I guess, a little bit of lightheartedness, because the first two are very dark, and then everything after this is really heavy. But here's the thing: this is, I don't even know if this is levity. This is, I guess it's not dramatic, or serious, but it's definitely not lighthearted. It's definitely not. I don't think I'd even call it funny. It's just kind of uncomfortable, but that's why I liked it, I think.
I like it because it's uncomfortable.
I wouldn't even call this a bad one. I don't think this game has any trials that are like.
It doesn't have any
bad.
trials that are bad, because like this one is. It's not like the second one where it's like these trials like physically do not make sense sometimes.
No.
Like the third one, woo, like physically does not work, or is very, like this one. It's like, okay, everything makes sense, at least how the murder was committed, and you have a weird motive.
They do a little bit better job of kind of giving. I would say this is a satisfying conclusion for Angie, because they've built her to be nothing more than an obnoxious character that gets in everybody's way. So it's sort of like a, and again, I mean, you could say this is part of the narrative too, is you're kind of wishing for this character's death at this point. Tenko, they do like a little bit of a thing where Himiko, I guess, becomes kind of less shy or like more active because of her death. I don't think that works as well, but I'll give them credit for giving something, because when they do these kind of jokey trials, sometimes they don't give you anything.
Yeah, it was nice for her to have just a little bit of character development, I guess.
But it's small. It's such a small. It's like it's almost nothing.
So going to the fourth trial, this one is good. This one is great.
This is like, I love what they did with this one. It was the same thing with the castles in the second game, where they kind of give you a completely unique environment with completely unique rules just for this trial, and that's a lot of fun when they do that. And there's so much to the environment in this game that they didn't have to create something wholly new, but it's so cool that they did. It kind of controls like it's like Club Penguin or like Habbo Hotel. They're in like the virtual reality game.
They're like little chibis or whatever you call them. What I like about this one and how it ties to the fourth one is that they're both meta, which like then like is like a foreshadowing to the metaness of the overall narrative of the game, which I also think is cool. What I really like about this one is that like it also really sets up the stage for Kokichi to kind of like become the really big villain. Because
I never bought for a second that he was a villain. I always could tell. I don't know. He's a really good character, but yeah.
Like, I should say, they do it. They set up this trial to make it a really good red herring that he is the villain, because he like does manipulate Gonta to kill Miru.
But he's got very strange motives for it too. That's the very end of this trial is where everything comes together.
He knew she was going to try to kill him.
Yes. But he also knew, or at least had a decent idea, that there wasn't anything outside. Because at this point he had found out that they're on Earth still, and there's really nothing. Are they on Earth or on the moon? I can't remember.
Well, the story as it is that they the story that is
the
set
context
up for
of his discovery was basically that chances are there was nothing else.
There was nothing else in the world, and he told that to Gonta, but Gonta is the person a different person in the virtual world because of the plugging thing. So
Yeah.
the virtual Gonta knows, quote unquote, knows, he thinks that the world outside of them is completely destroyed. And so he saw what he did as an Gonta saw what he did as an
Yep.
act of mercy, but Kokichi told him all of that to manipulate him to do it so then Miru wouldn't kill him. And he wouldn't have to be killed. But so it's like it's all the
It's a little complicated.
but it's
And it
pulled off really well.
and Gonta and Mio, I think, were two of my favorite characters in this game. And okay, I will say, go back a little bit. I do have a problem with this trial. I think some of the twists are incredibly obvious.
Yes.
The first hour of this trial is them trying to figure out how the movement in this game works. And I guess maybe people who haven't played video games wouldn't get that, but if you've played Zelda or like anything, you
Or
understand,
any 2D side scroll.
you understand immediately what you're trying to go for here. And I really don't like, this is really the only time where I was like, I get it. And then I also thought that the toilet paper being the murder weapon is also too obvious, because they make a point to tell you, okay, the items here are indestructible, they can't break, right? But they also have a moment where they specifically point out, oh, I can't use the toilet paper because the toilet paper won't break. I wish they would have not told me that right away.
I didn't even remember hearing about that. But I think something else I like about this too is that in every trial before this, there's like a point where they kind of think Gonta might have been the one. Because they're like, oh, he could have like thrown the ball in the first one. Oh, he like took everybody to the insect meet and greet in the second one, so then he could go kill. Like, there's always kind of implication. So then you as like the person playing it, you're like, oh, like he's just like this poor character, which he is. But then like he ends up actually being the killer in one of them, which I think is sad, but also
it's
creative.
a super cool idea that now, okay, the killer is somebody who doesn't know they were the killer, which is cool. And this character was really well planned out because he's kind of set up to be the lovable, dim-witted giant. He's very cute, very friendly, and you feel really bad because you ultimately figure out that he's the one who did it, and you feel bad as the player. The character Shuichi feels bad, but because of kind of the backstory and the themes of the game, he's committed to the truth. So this trial helps to demonstrate, I guess maybe you could take away from each thing, like with Trial 3, sometimes the truth is disturbing and uncomfortable and irrelevant. For Chapter 4, sometimes the truth is really, really difficult and can harm people who don't even know what they've done.
Yeah. And the truth, which was the motivation for Gonta, is also is the truth for everybody else, but then like Kokichi twists that truth to his own use. You know.
I never interpreted the Kokichi character of being genuinely malicious or evil.
I don't know. I think with this trial is like the closest he gets to full out evil, and then you like have the scenes where like he like is taking over or comes out as the mastermind, right? As players of this series, we should know right away that he's not if he's claiming he is. I think this is the closest he gets to it.
Mm-hmm.
Which the fifth trial is really satisfying. I don't know if you knew, but like I knew right away that was not Kaito in there who got smushed. I knew right away.
I didn't really. That was another one where I kind of figured out what the end result. This is with some trials, and you have this sometimes in Phoenix Wright, where it's like, okay, I know who did it and who's dead. I knew Kokichi was going to be dead, but it wasn't spoiled for me because it was fun to see how they actually did it. Because the result isn't really what's important. It's the method that I think is really interesting, and there's a lot of stuff to find out there. And I really like how, I think for one of the only times, because usually the death sequences are kind of treated as non sequiturs, like you can almost question whether or not they actually happened. But Kaito's death sequence is actually a really important moment for the character, which kind of caught me off guard, because A, his only dream was to be an astronaut and make it to the moon. He makes it to the moon. Second of all, he dies in the explosion, and technically Monokuma doesn't execute him. So he kind of went out on his own terms.
No, he dies from his illness.
Oh, his illness. Yeah, I thought it was an explosion, but
So like the spaceship gets sent up. It's like at the height of its arc, and there he dies from his illness, and then it falls back down.
the important thing was that he's dying on, or I guess not necessarily his turn, but he didn't let Monokuma have the last laugh, which I thought was a nice. Which, by the way, actually something I should point out. I forgot. Could we just go back 1 second? Chapter 4. I really like this detail. Because you talk about how they have the two Gontas. They have the virtual Gonta. They make a specific effort in his death scene to show that they are killing the virtual Gonta as well. Because people who have played the game know that if there's a virtual version of somebody, they could very well come back and change everything.
And they can get killed.
So they just shut that. Because right away, otherwise, the whole time I'd be like, okay, virtual Gonta's going to do something. And they just shut you up right there. No, he's gone. He's not doing anything. The guy you liked, he was nice and fun, he's gone.
So I think, like you said, with the fifth trial, it's like, as soon as, you have like the little screechy sound that happens when you find a murdered person, and like as soon as I saw that Kaito's jacket was in there, I'm like, everybody thinks it's Kaito and it's not Kaito. So it's like, we know it's Kokichi, we know it, but like how it happened was so cool, and like how everything in the story mixed together was cool and like made sense, but not in a way that was obvious.
It's cool because, yeah, you kind of need every piece, which is not only the pieces of evidence, but I think each of the characters involved interacted with either Kokichi or Kaito at some point that evening, but all at different times. So you have to take each person, more so than any other one, is each person's testimony and the evidence, like, tell the whole story, that's the real mystery, is how did it happen?
Yeah, because when you see the video, right, you can see it pause right before it's about to squish him. So you're like, oh, they just like record the video. But then you need to figure out, well, why were they working together when like they were supposedly not working together? Why would Kokichi decide to kill himself? Like all of that matters even more.
What was Kokichi's thing ended up? Because I always thought there was going to be a twist where he was actually the ultimate liar or the ultimate prankster, but he was always the ultimate supreme leader, right? They never did anything with that. I guess, again, not that it matters, but I like that they leave it kind of ambiguous, too. It's not necessarily that Kokichi was a good guy all along. It's kind of hinted that he's just sort of doing it to mess with Monokuma, but you could also make the argument that he's just actually a good boy. It's more nuanced than some of the other motivations they've had in the series, and I like that.
I would say if we're gonna put him on the the chaotic neutral good whatever, he would probably be a chaotic neutral, I think.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Because they make it clear when you're finding out more about the characters that they were never, him and his little gang were just pranksters, and they never killed or harmed anybody, really. They just did silly stuff.
It's a really good end to Kaito's character. I think. Like, I like that ending for him.
I honestly like to just say... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think I texted you this. I thought he was going to be the mastermind. Because there were just, like, weird things here or there. And I think they were, like, foreshadowings for him dying or for, this last...
Yeah, they do that. I was always... by the time this point in the game, I was always thinking, it's going to be Junko again or something with that. But then it's like they kind of trick you, and we'll get to that. But I did want to point out, too, I was especially thinking about Kaito. The character designs are incredibly strong in this game. Each character kind of has a color for their palette, which I like because I can remember that. But stuff like Kaito's hair is like a crescent moon with his beard. I think that's just like, I like stuff like that.
So we're going to go to the last trial now.
There's a lot here. I mean, when you talk about game, I mean, when you finish trial number 5, there's got to be another... I don't know, 10 hours in the game just because you have...
This search, like, part where they have to find all the clues takes a long time.
And there's a lot of information thrown at you. I really like that they kept... Because, I mean, obviously there's the secret of what's going on, but the mystery with Rantaro dying right away and not knowing what his special talent is, I think is a cool... element to this. I will say, going into this 6th trial, I'm not saying I suspected she was the mastermind, but I was thinking, wow, it is weird that they have done absolutely nothing with Tsumugi's character.
Yeah, besides the first trial. That's the only time where she's ever had an integral part, really, in anything. What I like about this, is that people don't like it. Like I like read things online and it's like people don't like the trial and I'm like, good, you shouldn't. Like that's not the point.
Yeah, before we even get to like the actual ending, just to say a couple things about the trial. I really like that for two different reasons. One, it's kind of fan servicey, but I like that we get to see every character in the series once more before what is implied to be a definitive end. And I think it's really cool. This is such a nice little touch because I noticed when I was playing through V3, especially you pointed this out to me too with Kokichi and Fuyuhiko are almost the exact same voice, but every character in V3 is the voice of a character from 1 or 2, and I think they do some clever stuff with that because I think Sumugi is the same woman as Sayaka, which is a cool bookend to the beginning and end of the series, and I think Rantaro might be Makoto or Hajime. I'm not sure.
I think it's Hajime. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I did. They do some really cool stuff with that, and I like that. That's who the. Yeah, I think Kibo might be Makoto. That's another.
You're not sure about Kibo.
I was really. I never saw any of this coming, and I didn't really even know what to expect once I had finished it. The fact that it perspective jumps, and then the first twist you're kind of thrown at that Sumugi is like the idea of Junko is kind of a really weird but interesting twist, and I like it more than it just being Junko. Or she's the ultimate cosplayer. Wait, you gotta run.
We'll start from the beginning. So what I first liked about this trial is that it starts with you figuring out who actually killed Rantaro, because you find new evidence and you're like, okay, if there's this secret doorway that leads to the first story girl's bathroom, somebody could have come down and like killed Rantaro, and also there's some evidence that doesn't line up with the first trial, so let's do that first. So then they're like, all right, who's the only one who could have done it? That's the way we're going to find out who the mastermind is. So then
that's cool.
So then they do it, and they're like, figure out. It's like, oh, Sumugi's the only one who could have done it, and they've told you from the beginning that she went to the bathroom. Like in the first trial, she says that. So then you're like, this makes sense. It's a story that lines up with what happened before, which is cool because then you're like, why did like KAEDE got killed? No, for like not actually killing him. But I like that there's the callback to the first. It's a nice bookend, to kind of wrapping the whole game together.
Oh, and before that, I talk a lot about the red herrings they use in this game. This is one of the only examples I can think of a bad red herring. They drop some weird thing at the end of this where I guess they say that KAEDE had a twin sister, but I guess it's just something that's made up, or it doesn't matter because they don't really talk. They're like, did she have a sister? No, she didn't. Okay, well, that's a really stupid red herring.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I didn't like that.
I forgot about that. I pushed it from my mind. So then you have Tsumugi, who is the ultimate cosplayer, which is where the relationship between the game and the fans starts to become very
you should.
intertwined.
I guess you should know by then. I didn't really think about it, but that should be. And I think that's a very interesting thing is you get to a certain point with any series, book, video game, TV show, you name it, where we talked about this with 2, where it's like now that you've had an audience reaction to it, you feel an obligation to respond to it or take that in. And what happens is you have shows that or games or whatever that continue to rehash elements or kind of self-reference themselves, and it ultimately takes away because you're kind of just building on things you've already done. But this is meant to play in. I mean, the writers are kind of saying we don't want to do that, but we're kind of also doing that, but we're doing it on purpose.
Yeah. It's a lot of like the first level of meta is that like the person who's kind of the mastermind of it is like, if you like, cosplay is kind of like one of, if you think about like fan cultures, right? Cosplay is kind of one of the examples.
Yeah,
like,
that makes sense.
Like one of the best examples because it's like you have people who put time and effort and energy, and they make amazing things. They have huge conferences, global conferences that's dedicated to this craft. So like the idea that the person who is the expert at impersonating everyone within the game series is like the ultimate mastermind is cool to me. And people were like, oh, like people who I was listening to things on YouTube or reading lists or whatever, and they're like, Sumugi's not as good of a villain of Junko, but it makes sense thematically because like the idea of truth versus lies, right? With cosplay.
Also, yeah, Junko isn't at any point, I think, meant to be like a deep or intriguing villain. The unassuming nature of it is kind of the point. It's also, and I can speak as an authority on this because I've officially had an online critic review a movie I've made. There is a complicated relationship between creator and like a fan. Like seeing somebody create, like put hours into a cosplay or a costume for something you've created, and it makes you ask weird questions where it's like, was what I did worth somebody spending maybe even more time on something? Or just like a general uncomfortableness with, I think Danganronpa, I guess we weren't really playing the games when it came out, but I think it has a pretty large and vocal fandom online, and that can create like weird or uncomfortable situations.
There is a lot of academic research into all like the relationship between the game's creator and staff and then fans. I'm not going to get into all the nerdiness of it. Basically, the idea is that by creating your own fan works, you can do so in a number of different ways and a number of different directions. But basically, you're kind of creating your own interpretation of what's happening by making your own work based off of the text. So it's like the person who is creating fan works, like cosplay, for example, is then kind of asserting their own understanding of it through their own creations.
Which could be completely different than the original artist's intent. And that's probably what I have to imagine they were experiencing when they were writing this. Because it really feels like there's a confusion and like almost like we didn't mean to create something so large, and now we aren't really sure how to obligate what everybody, or we aren't really sure how to satisfy it. Which, by the way, I know a lot of people are upset about this ending, but if you expected a definitive, satisfying, all epilogue bows wrapped up ending, you're playing the wrong series. This isn't out of nowhere. You should know that it's not going to be a clean ending. And yeah,
I was gonna say, I think the contradiction, the messiness of they created this franchise that people love, and this kind of goes into the reality show aspect of it. That I don't think it's this. I don't think it's a critique of reality television per se. The way they design it, it kind of is, but I think the creators probably are like, we're kind of overwhelmed by the idea. Like, if you see the trajectory from the first to the second one, is that like the second one was really focused on characters, and like the killings themselves were not all that much. They, besides Nagito's, the murders and the executions weren't really that bloody, that like crazy. Mm-hmm. And then you see the third one, it kind of goes and really deeply leans into the messiness and like the
and it establishes that very early.
And so like I think in a way this is kind of like responding to maybe some fans' criticism of the second one, and something that I think the creators themselves were probably surprised at is that people really enjoyed like the execution and the murder part of it. And I think part of why this ending worked so well for me is because it's saying like, you as a fan really need to think about what you actually enjoy about this series, and if it's the murder aspect of it, that is something that you should have a weird relationship with. And there isn't an easy way of saying like you can appreciate the creativity of a murder of a fictional character. Like that shouldn't sit and rest well with you in like a perfectly 100% straightforward kind of way.
And I think what's great, I think a lot of people get turned off by this ending too, because whether they believe it or just feel it, this ending is criticizing and questioning you, the player. It's asking you to, reconsider your values and ethics. But what I really like about it is it's left so ambiguous that I think it criticizes it, but it also kind of relishes in its own campiness. Like, it's okay with the fact that it kind of plays in, like, it's okay it understands that it creates complicated questions, and it might make people like things that they didn't want you to like, and it understands that the creator is as much an active role of that as the audience. And I think another big aspect of this is they are really criticizing, but also saying it's a really good thing, advocating for the ideas of sort of like projecting your beliefs, values, and interests on fictional characters and using fictional stories to kind of set your moral compass and even aspects of your personality. And it does kind of say that that's a bad thing, but at the same time, I think it shows how that can be a good thing. How sometimes fiction can create good situations. Sometimes lies can create good situations. It's much more complex than hope versus despair. It is fact and fiction, but both are given every opportunity to be the best and worst that they can be.
Yeah. What I like about it is it first starts out with that meta-ness with the characters. So like the characters themselves realize that everything they have done and reacted to within this simulation is very irrelevant to who they were outside of it. So like you know, Hirumi, she was the
The maid?
prime minister. Yeah.
Kirumi.
Oh, Kirumi. You know, like they like realized that all the memories that they got back from the flashlights were all made up. So like her motivation to kill Ryoma is completely irrelevant to who she was beyond the realm of this game.
And that's a very much of like you're getting your values from television and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
what I like about it, so they start with the meta-ness of the characters, right? So the characters realize that what they thought and what they like put trust and hope in isn't actually real. It's real in like a emotional sense, but not in like a physical reality sense. And then they again go and do that to the player of the game itself as well. So you take that meta-ness that the characters experience, and then you say, actually, what you need to think about these things too. It can't just be the characters thinking, what am I going to take from reality and what am I going to take from fiction? You also, as the player, have to think through and critically think through, what am I getting out of this playing experience? Is this something that's actually beneficial and like making me, I don't want to say better because that's such an abstract
Well, no,
word,
I think it pushes it in the opposite sense too, in a great way, where it kind of says, "Oh, you felt genuine sadness that KAEDE died in the first chapter. That wasn't real. That was fiction, and you felt something real." And you have to go, "Oh man, that feels kind of stupid." Yeah, you're right. But then the game also says, "Well, does it matter whether or not it was real? Does it matter, how it made you feel?" And it doesn't. Again, there's no right or wrong or better or worse. It's just making you ask questions about why you feel the way you do and how you interact with the media you take in.
And I think like out of many other mediums, like I feel like video games have a really because like you play video games, it's again being very vague here, but because you play video games and you interact with it on a physical level, like where you touch it and you press buttons to make things happen, I think the your connections to truth and reality, fiction and lies, participation and observance, all of these things are already so enveloped within just how you play a game that video games, I think, are a really good avenue to question those things and to make you think about those things more in depth. Because I can think of other games like Pony Island, for example, or like the Stanley Parable, that also, in completely different ways, also have you engage with similar questions. But this is much more like character-based.
I think the fact that it's an enormous time investment also plays in with that, and I like also that, in a way, just because of the concept, where it's anime, we're killing high schoolers, weird stuff happens, they can play around with it more. It's like if I watch a 45-minute episode of Black Mirror and it's about cell phones that eat you, the message sinks in a lot less. I feel like I'm being pandered to or talked down to or being talked about things in the blandest sense. But this game develops that emotional connection. You're already hooked in before it asks you why are you hooked in.
Exactly. And that's the thing when it comes to Drek like Black Mirror. But it comes to is like the a lot of things that people create. It's like, here is the message I'm going to tell you, and you should believe it. And if you don't believe it, then you're dumb, then you're stupid, or you don't understand my work. Whereas this is very much going again to the ultimate cosplay thing. It's like you as a player can not only just like blindly take in what we're giving you, but you also have to think about what we're doing and how it's actually affecting you, and whether or not something that is fictional, is it good that it's affecting you? Is it bad that it's affecting you? Is it somewhere in the middle? It's asking all of those questions in a way that something like Black Mirror, where they very deliberately like say like this is the message, cannot engage that kind of critical thinking.
The message isn't even like this or that is wrong. It's just said, if you're going to spend so much time of your life taking in media, you need to be an active participant in that. These things don't exist in a vacuum. The stuff you watch, the stuff you play can influence who you are and how you interact with others, and it's something you need to think about.
Mm-hmm. Which then is kind of expertly contrasted with the faceless audience, right? Because it's sending you a direct message, like, you as a player, you as an audience member need to think about all of these things, and then it has that foil of like the faceless, literally faceless audience watching all of this happen. And I think part of the critique of that mass audience thing is like, if you're just going to be one of like the faceless people that just will watch whatever and consume whatever that's placed in front of you, and you're not thinking about it, then you're kind of just blindly following things. You're kind of not really thinking about the world or ideas or things that you should be considering if you're just kind of part of this blind audience. But then it also puts you in that, because it's like, well, even if you're interpreting things, you're still part of this mass audience.
I know, and that's where the game stands, but it knows that, and that's what's so great. There's this really haunting, I found it kind of haunting, the moment where they only show one clip of it, and it's really fantastic. It's like Kaito, and it works extra well because it's after his death, and it's a clip of his like audition for the reality show, and he says something like, "Oh, I can't wait to do this. I can't wait to kill so many people. I'm definitely gonna win." And they have a moment too earlier where it's like a video Rantaro talking, and he says something like, "You wanted this."
Yeah.
And that's kind of the theme, is you all want, and it's like, that's again, I don't know, like maybe you create something and people think it's so great and fantastic, and this is maybe them saying, take a step back, okay, and just hold back. This is Danganronpa. We're killing kids. You know, this is sometimes what you guys come off like when you talk about this game.
Yeah. Yeah, especially I mean, I'm sure on like trailers and like on the Steam site and whatever, there are probably people who comment on there and being like, if I were in this, I'd totally win.
Yeah, and not to be Mr. Snooty Tooty, but there are probably a sizable amount of people that played this game and completely, like, not even just disagreed with it, but just completely missed the last hour and is like, oh, the last Danganronpa sucks. All this stupid, it's not real. It's a game. It's fake. Like, they not.
What I think about that, then, it's like, you're going through the thought process that like is kind of the message of the story, but you're not understanding that that's what the point is. The point is that like, you shouldn't just it shouldn't be fan service, right? It shouldn't be something that doesn't challenge you. And what people don't like about it is that it's challenging them to think about their position. And then they're like, well, it's all just meta, and it all, like, none of it matters. And it's like, the point isn't whether or not it matters. The point is like, what do you make from it?
Yes. And the fact that this is the end of a trilogy, not only that, it's a trilogy where each of the games kind of stands out. Each has their own things they're doing, their own, like, you can kind of visually understand each one, but the third one is definitively the biggest experience, the boldest experience. They put everything they had into this, whether or not it was intentional. And in a way, I kind of hate that it's the perfect ending, because I would love to play a fourth game in this series. I think there is so much more you can do. reset everything, do a complete reboot, but keep the same concept and the same gameplay loop, and you could make these interesting and engaging forever. However, if you do that, you're kind of invalidating the ending of this, so that stinks. But I'm gonna be selfish. I want to see more.
Well, the game, like you said, the gameplay loop is really interesting. It's it provides a lot of tension. It provides room for character growth. Like the very concept of itself allows for kind of this base idea that also allows for so much variation, and you can also do the same with gameplay. So it's like not only can the story grow or go into different directions, but then also the gameplay can. So it's kind of like, but then it's also scary because you're like, oh, the golden idea is having kids kill each other.
But that's the thing. The fact that it's teenagers, I think, is integral. The fact that everybody has a different talent is integral. If you change those things, you've lost it. But just keep those two things, and you could make these until the dawn of time. Obviously, they thought they'd done enough. Maybe try it with a new team, try something different. But there's more. There's more to see here, I guess. I don't know. But then again, it's so 1, 2, 3. It caps it off so well.
Yeah, I think. And you said this before, what I like about the ending is that it is open-ended, but also finite.
Yeah, it's very clear them, like, without literally saying it, we are kind of sick of making these games and want to do something new. But we're not gonna do it halfway. We're gonna make this last one.
And that's also reflected in the characters where they're like, we're not going to vote for despair or hope. We're just not going to do anything.
And again, that's a great criticism of some of the stuff in they're still not afraid to look back, even though the first game was a huge success and even parts of the second game were huge successes. They're not afraid to continue to evolve.
Mm-hmm. Which is great, because especially when there's many game series where it just keeps getting more derivative and more lazy and more of the same with just like a fresh coat of paint on it. Whereas the game is like actually evolving, and the thought process is actually evolving, and the conceptions of what the themes are going to be is evolving, which is very rare for a video game series.
Yeah, and you could tell they spend a lot of time on these two. I think they said pretty. If this year is the 10th anniversary, if they announce something this year, we need to do another podcast, which is just a horrible hopes, dreams, wants, expectations.
We should do a response video where it's like down in the corner, and then we watch it, and then we yell really loud when anything happens.
Yeah, like all those videos when people watch the Star Wars trailers and they start crying when they see Chewbacca. It'll be like that.
Yep. Like you said, the idea behind the third one is kind of like, this can't go on. So we'll see what happens.
It's not even like hinted or thing. It's like they are flat out saying we want to be done. But they said they're going to have a new announcement every month. They're doing mobile. This kind of blew my mind. They're doing mobile ports of all 3 games.
Oh.
My goodness, the third game is like 50 gigabytes.
Yeah, that's going to be... I mean, I get like the touchscreen. You know what I'm doing right now?
What?
Pirating. Don't tell anyone. I'm pirating 9 People, 9 Doors, 9 Hours, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I have I have that and the Zero Escape trilogy on Steam. So maybe we can talk about those someday.
I'm playing through 999 right now, and I am actually enjoying it a lot. Like, you can tell the same ideas are kind of going around, but the gameplay itself is a little different, but it's still kind of the same ethos. I like it a lot so far. Only one person has died because I've only played like 2 hours of it, but it's fun. It's good stuff.
Yeah, that's our run through the whole series right there.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe there'll be V4.
They'll think if they do another one, they got to do a reboot. It should be just like, don't even have maybe.
This might be. I could see it working without Monokuma, Like maybe you have some other.
Maybe he's a small element. He's got to make an appearance or a cameo somewhere. But yeah, something. I mean, we didn't even talk about Monokuma that much because he's, like I said, he's almost like he's not the narrator. You're obviously the protagonist character, but he's. It's like if you're reading a book. He's a lot of. You know what I mean.
I need to. So Travis, you don't know this because I just edited the last two. But at the end of every video, I like include a little clip or a little funny thing from each of the games, like a little joke or something,
Yeah.
as like the ending. So I need to figure out. Do you have any lines that stick out to you, or any? I should say any of the characters that stick out to you.
Um, I really like. I'm not gonna say any, but go back and look at some of Miyu's localized lines and insults. Those were some of my favorite moments from the games. Also, when Kokichi was being very sassy towards her, and some other times.
Oh,
There's
that is good. That's good.
definite standouts for me.
They're good.
What's the lesson from Danganronpa V3?
I mean, it's kind of what we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, but I think I think a part of it is as you like consume something, think about, read, play. I think it's important to be thinking about what the game or the movie or the film or whatever is trying to do, and whether or not you like what you see yourself as getting out of it, and what you necessarily like. I don't want to say critical, but just having a critical eye about what you consume and what you think of the media that you're discussing or talking about or whatever.
And don't be afraid if you're intimidated or confused or frustrated by that experience either, because that's kind of part of it. I just succinctly ask questions about why you're doing what you're doing and how it was made and what you can take. Questions.
Isn't that a John Mayer where he's like, I just found out there's no such thing as a real world?
I only listen to Insane Clown Posse, so I don't know. I don't know.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Game Detectives podcast. Oh, and don't forget.
Ooh, you so clumsy, girl. Gotta be more careful there, Himiko.
Bye.
Thank you so much for playing my game.